You know, sometimes a smell just takes you back. Just now, I pulled an old pie tin out of the cupboard, the one with the little dent on the left side, where it slipped from my hand one Christmas morning in '78, and as I opened that drawer, well, I'll tell you what. A wave of cinnamon and warm apples just came flooding out like it had been waiting all these years. Land sakes alive, I hadn't baked an apple pie in months, but that smell, oh honey, it hit me like a summer storm. And just like that, I was back in my little yellow kitchen, wearing my blue apron with daisies on it, the radio humming Patsy Cline in the background, and Henry sitting at the table, tapping his wedding ring on the formica, grinning like he'd just won the county fair. It was 1961, October, I think. Leaves were just starting to fall, and the air had that sweet crispness that only comes when summer gives up and fall takes her place. I remember I had the windows open, letting in the breeze, and I'd just pulled the pie from the oven, golden brown, edges a little too dark, 'cause I'd gotten distracted dancing around the kitchen with our youngest, Susie. She was still in diapers, chubby little legs trying to follow my two-step. Oh Lord, we didn't have much back then, not a pot to pee in, truth be told, but we had music, and we had laughter, and somehow that was enough. That was more than enough. Funny how a pie tin can open a whole chapter of your heart. Now, I've told plenty o' stories in my time, to my kids, my grandbabies, even to that nosy hairdresser who always wanted the latest gossip, but this one I've kept real close. Not 'cause it's some big secret. No, ma'am. It's just personal. It's tender, like an old quilt that's been mended so many times you can't tell what part came first. But lately, I've been thinking maybe it's time I shared it. You see, there's a kind of wisdom you only get with years. Wrinkles come free, but wisdom, well, you gotta earn that. And there's something I learned that fall day in '61, standing barefoot in my kitchen, pie in the oven, baby on my hip, something about happiness, about what it really means. Back in my day, folks didn't go looking for happiness in books or seminars or YouTube videos. No, sir. We made do with what we had: a good meal, a hug at the right time, a soft place to land at the end of a hard day. That was happiness. Not flashy, not loud, but solid, like an old porch swing that still holds your weight after all these years. So, if y'all don't mind, I'd like to take a little walk down memory lane with you. Just you and me. I'll share some stories that might make you laugh, maybe cry a little, maybe even think about your own recipe for happiness. I don't have all the answers, Lord knows I've messed up plenty, but I've lived long enough to know this. Sometimes the smallest moments hold the biggest truths. Now, don't go running off just yet. This ain't no fairy tale, and I ain't no guru. I'm just Mabel, a Texas girl with a few miles on her boots, a few burns on her hands from bikini too long, and a heart that's still learning how to love right. And if you stick with me till the end, well, who knows? You just might find a piece of your own story tucked in mine. But let me ask you something before we get started. When was the last time a smell brought you to tears? Back then, the world was slower, softer, like a porch swing at dusk, creaking in rhythm with the crickets. I was born in 1934, out in a little clapboard house just outside of Waco, Texas. Dirt road, chickens in the yard, and a clothesline that ran from the back porch to the only tree that dared to grow tall on our lot. My mama used to say that tree was stubborn like me, refused to give up, even in the driest of summers. I was the youngest of 5, the baby, which meant I was spoiled with love, but not much else. We didn't have much money, Lord have mercy, no. We didn't have a telephone till I was near grown. No air conditioning either. Just open windows, paper fans from church, and a jug of sweet tea we kept cool in the well. But we made do. That's how we did it in those days. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor while Mama kneaded biscuit dough, singing hymns under her breath. Her hands were always moving, snapping beans, scrubbing floors, folding clothes, but her voice was calm, like she had a secret peace I didn't understand just yet. Daddy worked the rail line, gone more often than home, but when he walked through that door, dusty and tired, he'd lift me up like I weighed nothing, call me his little light, and I believed I could glow if I tried hard enough. I was just a girl, scrawny as a fence post, but full of dreams. I thought the world was good, mostly. That people meant well. I believed kindness was the greatest power a person could hold. I thought love meant forever. And I honestly believed folks always came back, like Mama's boomerang pie pans that never stayed lost for long. I'd lay out on the grass at night, watching the stars blink awake one by one, and I'd dream of things I couldn't name yet, a house of my own, maybe a little baby in a blanket, maybe someone who'd dance with me in the kitchen just because. Sundays were my favorite. We'd pile into the old truck, dressed in our best, and ride to that tiny white church at the top of the hill. The preacher always preached too long, but the potlucks after were worth it. Fried chicken, peach cobbler, laughter carrying across the lawn. That's where I first saw Henry. I didn't know it then, I was only 10, and he had grass stains on his knees, but Lord, if I'd known he'd one day steal my heart, I might have smiled at him a little sooner. Life wasn't easy, not by a long shot. There were nights Mama cried real quiet, thinking we didn't hear. There were winters when we stuffed rags in the cracks of the windows and prayed for the frost not to bite too hard. But somehow, through all that, I grew up believing in the good, in the music of the wind through cotton fields, in fireflies and front porches, in good neighbors and long summers. I thought the world was hard, yes, but also beautiful and worth it. I guess that's where it all started, this idea I've carried with me all my life, that happiness isn't some big, shiny moment. It's built, little by little, from morning biscuits and sleepy prayers and someone remembering how you like your coffee. That's what I believed back then. And you know what? I still do. So tell me, if you could go back to your earliest memory, what do you see? It was the summer of 1950, and the air was thick with the kind of heat that makes the screen door stick. I was 16, just old enough to feel grown, but still green round the edges, thinking I knew everything about the world. We'd gotten ourselves a new preacher that year, fresh out of seminary and full of fire, and he decided to host a town dance. Said it was time the youth fellowshipped in a God-honoring way. Mama made me wear my good blue dress, the one with the tiny white buttons up the front and the sash that tied just a little too tight. I wasn't thrilled about it, truth be told. I didn't much care for crowds. But something in the air that night felt different, like the wind itself was leaning in to listen. That's when I saw him, Henry Joseph Carter. He was standing near the lemonade table, Logan at something his buddy said, and Lord have mercy, that laugh. It just wrapped around me like a warm breeze. He wasn't the tallest boy in town, and his shirt was a bit wrinkled like he'd pulled it straight from the line, but he had these deep, kind eyes like he'd already lived a little, even though he was just 17. And when he caught me looking, "Oh, honey," I turned so fast I nearly spilled my cup. I couldn't explain it at the time, but my heart, it did this little skip, like it was trying to tell me something my brain hadn't figured out yet. We danced, just once. Tennessee Waltz, I remember, playing scratchy on the old record player the church borrowed from the schoolhouse. He took my hand real gentle, like I was made of glass, and we didn't talk much, just smiled like fools. My feet were clumsy and I kept stepping on his toes, but he never let go. That was the first thing I noticed about Henry. He stayed. No matter how awkward or messy or uncertain things got, he stayed. After that night, I saw him everywhere. At the market, at church, even down by the creek where he'd go fishing. We weren't courting yet, but we'd find little excuses to talk. He'd carry Mama's groceries or bring fresh tomatoes from his daddy's farm. I started baking more, pies mostly, and accidentally sending one over to their place with my brother. He always sent the plate back washed and wrapped in a thank you note written in that crooked handwriting of his. I didn't know then that this boy would one day hold my hand through childbirth, or dance with me in the kitchen after losing a job, or sit beside me quiet for hours after my mama passed. But even back then, something in me knew he was different. He didn't rush. He didn't boast. He listened. And when he looked at me, it felt like he saw me, not the girl I was pretending to be, but the girl I was. I didn't have words for it at 16, but now I know. That's what real love feels like. You young folks may think love's all firecrackers and grand gestures, but I'll tell you what, sometimes love's just showing up every single day, especially on the ones when you don't feel like dancing, especially when the pie burns, especially when life don't look like the dream you planned. Henry taught me that. He taught me that loving somebody means staying not just when it's easy, but when it's real hard. So, if you're listening now, let me ask you something. When was the last time you stayed, even when it would have been easier to leave? It was a Tuesday. Funny how I remember that part clear as day, but not what I wore or what the sky looked like. Just Tuesday. I was 17 and sweeping the porch when I heard Mama's voice from inside, not loud, not crying, just real flat, like someone had knocked the wind right out of her. "Mabel, honey," she called, and I knew. I don't know how I knew, but I did. Daddy had died that morning out on the tracks. Heart gave out quick and clean, they said. 1 minute he was checking the lines, the next he was just gone. I stood there holding that broom like it could stop time, like if I didn't move, none of it would be real. I didn't cry. Not then. Mama did later, behind her apron, fastened the stove like she always did when she didn't want us to see her fall apart. My brothers went quiet, like boys do when they don't know how to feel, and my sister Ruthie started praying louder than usual, like maybe God was listening extra hard. But me, I just felt angry. Not at Daddy, not at God, exactly. I was angry at how fast everything changed. 1 minute I was thinking about a dress I wanted to sew for the dance, and the next I was standing at the kitchen table trying to help Mama figure out how we were going to pay the light bill. And I was ashamed for thinking about the dress at all. That was the part one couldn't say out loud, the shame. I felt selfish, like maybe I wasn't mourning the right way. We couldn't afford a proper burial. The church helped some, and Mr. Carmichael from the store donated a pine box. I remember standing by that grave in shoes that pinched my toes, holding Mama's hand so tight I thought I'd break her fingers. She didn't cry, not that day. Just stood there like a statue, eyes fixed on nothing. And I felt it, this big, empty ache that sat in my chest like a stone. Not just grief. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Daddy was the one who held us together. He never said much, but when he did, it mattered. And now he was gone, and all I could think was, what if we come apart now? What if Mama can't do this alone? What if I can't? Henry came by that night, brought fresh peaches from his mama's tree and just sat with me. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't say anything wise. He just took my hand in that steady way of his and let me cry. And when I say cry, I mean cry the ugly kind. The kind you hide from folks. I don't think I'd ever cried like that before, and Lord knows, I have since. But that night was the first time I felt safe enough to let it all out. That's how I knew it was real, the love. 'Cause he stayed through the silence, through the mess, through the storm. For months after, I'd wake up early, hoping I'd hear Daddy's boots coming up the steps, forgetting, just for a second, that he was gone. That's what grief does, it plays tricks on you. It wraps itself around your memories, till even the good ones hurt a little. Looking back now, I realize that's when I started growing up for real. Not when I got my first kiss. Not when I graduated school. But that day, the day I lost my daddy, that's when the world stopped being safe and started being real. So let me ask you this. What was the moment you stopped feeling like a child? 'Cause I remember mine like it happened just yesterday. It was a Tuesday again. Isn't that something? Funny how Tuesdays keep showing up in the hardest parts of my life. It was April 1976. Spring had just come in, the dogwoods were blooming, and the house smelled like fresh linens and lemon polish. I was hanging clothes out on the line, socks and undershirts, mostly, when the phone rang. That old rotary one we kept in the hallway with the cord stretched so tight it could clothesline a grown man. I didn't rush. I wiped my hands first. I remember that. I wiped my hands, like maybe if I moved slow enough, the world would too. "Mrs. Carter," the voice said, real flat, real polite. "There's been an accident." I dropped the phone. I don't remember doing it, but I remember the sound, heavy, like a skillet hitting the floor. Henry was gone. Just like that. Heart attack on the job, they said. He was helping fix a friend's roof, said he felt dizzy, sat down for a minute, and never got back up. And just like that, my whole world split clean in two. I don't know how long I stood there in that hallway. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. The clock on the wall had stopped, literally stopped. 2:47. I stared at it, like maybe if I just waited long enough, that little second hand would start ticking again, and I'd wake up from whatever nightmare I'd wandered into. But it didn't. It stayed still. And so did I. The kids were still young, not babies, but young enough that they didn't quite understand. I had to tell Em. I had to hold them while they cried. I had to make dinner. I had to keep the house clean. I had to smile when people brought casseroles and said things like, "He's in a better place." I had to be strong, but inside, I was breaking. Quietly, softly, all the way through. That first night alone in bed, Lord have mercy. I lay there and kept reaching for his side of the mattress, like he'd just gone to the bathroom or stepped out for a glass of water. I kept waiting for his snoring to start up, for his hand to brush mine in the dark. But all I heard was the creak of the house settling and the sound of my own breathing, like it belonged to someone else. You know what no one tells you? The worst part ain't the funeral. It's the Tuesday after. When the flowers wilted and the phones stopped ringing and folks gone back to their lives. But you're still in that hallway, holding a phone that ain't never gonna ring the same. That's when grief sets its roots in you. Not loud, not dramatic. Quiet, like dust in a corner. Like a song you used to hum but can't remember the words to. I lost more than a husband that day. I lost the part of me that felt held, that felt chosen, that felt safe. I didn't know who I was without him. I'd built a whole life around we, and now there was just me. That realization, it felt like drowning slow, but you know what else? Something cracked open in me too. Something strong. I didn't know it then, but loss has a way of showing you what's still alive inside. And somewhere between casseroles and laundry and keeping the kids going, I started hearing my own voice again. Real soft at first, but steady. Steady like his hand used to be. So, let me ask you something. If you lost the person you thought you couldn't live without, who would you become? After Henry passed, the world didn't end. I thought it might, or maybe I hoped it would, for a little while. But no, the days kept coming, just as steady and unbothered as ever. The sun still rose, the mail still came, and the radio still played the same songs we used to dance to in the kitchen. That part hurt the most. How normal everything stayed. How the rest of the world didn't seem to notice it had lost one of its best men. I remember sitting on the porch swing with a blanket over my lap, staring out at the yard like I was waiting for something. I didn't know what. Maybe I thought if I sat still enough, Henry would come walking back up the steps with that tired smile and a sack of groceries. Or maybe I just didn't know what else to do. The house was quiet, too quiet. His boots still sat by the door for weeks. I couldn't bear to move them. Like touching them would make it real in a way I wasn't ready for. I went through the motions. Cooked breakfast. Folded laundry. Paid bills. Took care of the kids. But inside, Lord, I felt hollow. Like someone had scooped out my insides and left just enough shell to keep me walking. I didn't laugh. I didn't sing to the radio. I didn't bake pie. And that might sound small to you, but if you knew me, you'd know when I ain't bikini, something's wrong. The church ladies came by at first. Bless their hearts, they meant well. They brought casseroles and scriptures and stories about God's greater plan. But their words slid right off me, like rain on an old tin roof. I didn't want verses. I wanted my husband. I wanted my life back. The one where I wasn't this tired, this emptied, this alone. I started questioning things I never dared question before. My faith, my strength, even my purpose. I'd built so much of my life around being a wife, a partner, a team. Without him, I didn't know who Mabel was. Not really. I was just there, moving through time like a ghost in her own story. There were days I didn't get dressed, days I didn't brush my hair, days I didn't speak a word to another soul. I'd look in the mirror and not recognize the woman staring back. She looked tired, dull, like all the color had been washed out of her by a storm that didn't leave nothing behind but debris. And yet, somewhere in all that quiet, I started hearing myself again. Not right away, not loud, but there were moments, small ones, where I'd find myself humming an old tune while doing the dishes, or smiling at something the kids said, or feeling a breeze that made me close my eyes and just breathe. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was life. I wasn't the same woman. That Mabel, the one who danced in the kitchen with a man who smelled like cedar and motor oil, she was gone. But in her place, a different kind of woman was growing. One who knew silence. One who'd learned how to stand on her own. One who was still figuring out how to hope again, but hadn't given up on trying. So let me ask you something. Who are you when no one's looking? When it's just you and the silence? I think it started with a spoon. Just a plain OL wooden spoon. Ain't that silly? All the big moments in life, and mine came down to a stirring spoon with a crock down the side. It was a Tuesday again, imagine that, and I was cleaning out the back of the pantry, mostly to keep my hands busy. Dusting off old jars, tossing expired cans. That's when I found it. Buried under a rusted sifter and a box of Jell-O I'd long forgotten. It was the same spoon Henry made for me, back when we didn't have the money to buy a new one. Whittled it from an old pecan branch, sanded it smooth with a matchbox, carved a tiny heart right on the handle. Said, "A spoonful of love makes everything taste better." Lord, I'd forgotten about that. I sat down right there on the kitchen floor and just held it, like it was something sacred, like it still had the warmth of his hands in it. And, for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. I smiled, just a little, just enough. The next day, I made a pie. It wasn't even a special occasion. I just wanted to smell cinnamon and nutmeg again, wanted the oven on, wanted to hear the sound of something vikine in the house. The crust was too thick, the apples too soft, but honey, it was the best thing I'd tasted in months. I left it on the windowsill like I used to, And before long, little Tommy Jameson from next door came knocking. Said he smelled pie and wanted to know if it was for Sharon. I laughed, a real one this time, and handed him a slice on a napkin. He gave me a big ol' grin with 2 front teeth missing. Said, "You should open a bakery, Miss Mabel." And, just like that, something flickered on inside me. Not a dream, not yet, but a reason. A crack in the grief wide enough to let a little light in. I started baking once a week. First for the neighbors, then for church gatherings, then a couple of widows who didn't get many visitors. Word spread, as it does in small towns. Folks started dropping by, not just for pie, but for company. They'd sit on the porch, sip sweet tea, tell me stories I'd never heard before. And somewhere in the middle of all that sugar and flour, I started feeling like Mabel again. Not the old Mabel, no. She was gone. But a new version. Softer in some places, stronger in others. I didn't plan to keep living. Not in that full, reaching, heart-open way. I thought I'd just coast. Keep my head down till the Lord decided it was time. But turns out I wasn't done yet. Turns out there were still people who needed me, even if it was just for a slice of pie and a place to sit a spell. Funny how purpose sneaks back in when you're not looking. It don't come with a bang. It comes with a knock at the door. A wooden spoon. A child's smile. A pie that didn't burn. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you did something just because it made you feel alive? There's a drawer in my bedroom I hadn't opened in near 20 years. Third one down on the left side of the old oak dresser Henry built with his own 2 hands back when we were just starting out. The knob's loose, been that way forever. I used to jiggle it every time I walked past, but after he died, I stopped touching it altogether. Like maybe if I didn't open it, I wouldn't have to face what was inside. It held all the things I didn't know what to do with. His pocket knife. A note he wrote me on a gum wrapper. The key to his truck, which I sold long ago but couldn't bear to forget. And a letter. One I never mailed. I wrote it a year after he passed. Sat down at the kitchen table one night, just me and a cup of cold coffee, and poured out everything I couldn't say to anybody else. How angry I was. How scared. How abandoned I felt, even though I knew he didn't leave on purpose. I blamed him anyway, and then hated myself for blaming him. I told him I didn't know how to be a whole person without him. That I wasn't sure I wanted to. And at the very end of that letter, I wrote 6 little words, "But I will try to be." I folded it up, stuck it in that drawer, and there it stayed. All those years. Waiting. Last week, I opened it. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the sound of the wind that day, or the way the light hit the wall in the afternoon, soft and gold like it used to be when we danced in the kitchen. Or maybe it was just time. Real time. The kind your heart makes when it's finally ready to move forward, not because it stopped hitting, but because you're tired of carrying the hurt like it's all you've got left. I read that letter, every word, cried so hard I had to sit down, not from pain, but from release. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I wasn't lost. I was still here, still breathing, still learning. And somewhere along the way, I'd grown into someone I didn't even recognize, but someone I was proud of. So I did something I never thought I would. I took that letter, that knife, and that key, and I walked out to the back field, the one where we used to lay and name stars. I dug a little hole with my hands, right under that stubborn pecan tree, and I buried them. Every last piece. Not because I wanted to forget him. Lord, no. But because I needed to let go of the version of me who couldn't live without him. I whispered, "Thank you for loving me," and then I walked back inside. And you know what? The sky looked clearer after. I slept deeper that night than I had in years. I didn't become a new woman in a day, but in that moment, I made a choice. I would live forward, without apology, without regret, with a heart still tender, yes, but no longer carrying the weight of what could have been. So let me ask you this. What are you still holding in that drawer of yours? And what would happen if you finally let it go? You know, I used to think life was a road. One long, straight stretch, with little signs along the way telling you what to do next. Go here, turn there, yield, stop, start a family, buy the house, bake the pie. But now, looking back, I think it's more like a quilt. A bit messy, frayed at the edges. Some pieces too small, some so bright they blind you. Others so dark you don't know what to do with them. But you stitch it all together, thread by thread, and somehow it holds. I've lived a long life, 80-something years now. That's a lot of days, a lot of Tuesdays. And what I've come to learn, not from books, not from sermons, but from living it day in and day out, is this. Happiness isn't something that finds you. It's something you decide to notice. See, I spent too many years waiting for things to feel right again, waiting for grief to pass, waiting for someone to knock on the door and bring back the life I used to have. But nobody came. Nobody was supposed to. It took me the better part of a decade to understand I was the one I was waiting for. The day I stopped expecting life to feel the way it used to was the day I started really living again. It's easy to look back and think, if only he'd lived longer, if only I'd said more, if only I'd gone after that thing I put off. But if only don't change a thing, sugar. What changes things is when you say, even so, I'm still here. That's where the real story begins. I don't have a perfect life. Lord knows I still have lonely days, knees that ache, people I miss so hard it catches in my throat. But I also have mornings where the light comes in just right and I can smell coffee from the kitchen. I have the laughter of my grandbabies running through the hall. I have the sound of an old song I forgot I loved coming through the radio while I'm kneading dough. And every now and then I still dance. Not like I used to, but enough. And maybe that's the real lesson. That joy doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it's a whisper. Sometimes it's a pie cooling on a windowsill. Sometimes it's just waking up and saying, all right, world, I'm still here. Let's try again. You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to have it all figured out. But you do have to stop waiting for someone else to hand you permission. You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to let go. You're allowed to begin again, even if you've begun 100 times already. So, if there's one thing I hope you take from all my rambling and pie baking and sitting on this porch with me, it's this. Life isn't what you lost. It's what you're still willing to reach for. Even if it's small, even if your hands shake. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for you to stop waiting, too. Maybe it's time you asked yourself, what part of life have I been sitting on the sidelines of, hoping it would invite me in? Well, if you've stayed with me this far, bless your heart. You've listened longer than most folks do these days. I reckon that's worth something. I know I've rambled, and my stories tend to wander like a cat on a warm porch, slow and without direction, but always finding their way back home. Still, I hope somewhere in all this, you found a little piece of yourself, a memory, a feeling, a moment that made your own heart stir. You see, this wasn't just a story about pie crusts and porch swings, or even about Henry and me. It was about choosing to live, really live, through all of it. The holding on and the letting go. The days that broke me and the ones that healed me slow. And truth be told, I'm still learning. Still figuring out how to be in this world without the people I thought I couldn't go on without. Some days I do better than others. Some days I talk to him, Henry, I mean like he's just in the next room. Tell him what the grandkids are up to, what the neighbors said about my cobbler, whether it's gonna rain. Silly things. But it helps. And sometimes, well, sometimes I still catch myself leaving the porch light on, even when I know there's no one coming. Habit, maybe? Or maybe, just maybe, some part of me believes he's still out there. In some way. Watching. Remembering. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what comes next. Not really. But I've stopped being afraid of it. Life has a funny way of showing up just when you think it's all over. And love, well, it don't die easy. It changes, sure. It quiets. It settles in your bones. But it doesn't leave you. Not really. So I guess what I want you to know is this. You're not too late. Not for love. Not for joy. Not for starting again. I don't care if you're 18 or 80. There's still something in this world with your name on it. Still a song you haven't sung. A walk you haven't taken. A hand you haven't held. And maybe the best part of your story hasn't even happened yet. I don't have all the answers. I've made more mistakes than I care to count. I've been wrong, I've been stubborn, I've held on too long and let go too soon. But if there's one thing I've come to believe, deep in my soul, it's this. We are built for love. Not just the kind you fall into, but the kind you choose. The kind you stay for. The kind you carry with you, even when the bed gets cold and the years get long. So now, sugar, let me ask you something. Do you believe real love finds its way back? I'm not saying I know for sure, but some nights when the wind moves just right through the trees and the stars seem a little closer than usual, I feel him, not in a spooky way, just in the way you feel a memory wrap around you like a quilt. Familiar, safe, like home. And sometimes, sitting out here with a cup of tea and a heart a little too full, I catch myself smiling at the empty chair next to me and think, maybe he still remembers too.